There is a number that should not be possible. 15 days. That is how long it takes one company to go from a sketch on a designer's table to a finished garment hanging on a rack in a store, ready for you to try on. 15 days. The rest of the fashion industry runs on a calendar built around the seasons. Designers plan a year ahead. Factories in Asia get their orders 6 months before anything reaches a shelf. By the time a trend appears on a runway, the clothes that answer it are already locked, already shipping, already too late to change. That was simply how clothing worked. Everyone accepted it. And then a company from a rainy corner of northern Spain decided the entire calendar was wrong. It does not guess what you will want next spring. It watches what you are buying this Tuesday, and it has a new version in the window by the following week. It barely advertises. For decades, its founder never gave a single interview, and yet it turned a man who left school at 13 into one of the richest human beings on the planet. This is the story of Zara, and of the machine that quietly killed the fashion season. To understand the machine, you have to start with the boy. Amancio Ortega was born in 1936 in a small village in the Leon region of Spain, the son of a railway worker. The family followed the rail lines north and west until they settled in A Coruña, a port city on the Atlantic coast of Galicia, where the rain falls more days than not. There was no money. The story Ortega has told about his childhood always returns to one moment. As a boy, he overheard his mother at a shop counter being told there was no more credit. Whatever the exact memory, the lesson was poverty, and it was early. At 13, he left school and went to work. His first job was as an errand boy for a shirt maker in A Coruña, carrying finished garments to customers across the city. He was not designing anything. He was learning from the floor up how a piece of clothing actually gets made, priced, and sold, and crucially, where in that chain the money was made and lost. If you find stories like this one worth your time, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making them. Because the lesson that built an empire did not come from the shop, it came from a disaster. By his 20s, Ortega had worked his way up. He was managing a clothing store, watching how the business really ran. And what he saw was a trap. The manufacturer made the product, then handed it to a wholesaler, then a retailer. 3 sets of hands, 3 sets of margins, and the person who actually made the clothes had the least control of anyone. Then came the moment that hardened into doctrine. The standard version of the story is brutal and simple. A large buyer placed a major order, Ortega produced the goods, and at the last moment the buyer walked away. The order was cancelled. He was left holding inventory he had built on credit, with no one to sell it to, and the very real possibility of going under. He had done everything right. He had made exactly what he was asked to make, and it almost destroyed him anyway, because his survival depended entirely on someone else's decision. Most people would have absorbed the loss and gone back to taking orders. Ortega drew a different conclusion. Never again would he let someone stand between what he produced and the person who bought it. He would control the making. He would control the selling. He would own the entire path from his hands to the customers. It sounded like overreach. It was the principle that would become Zara. In 1963, Ortega started making clothes himself, not in a factory, at home with his wife Rosalia Mera, who worked as a seamstress. The first products were quilted bathrobes and housecoats, humble, practical garments. The company name was Confecciones Goa, his own initials run backwards. The model was quiet but clever. Ortega would look at the elegant, expensive lingerie and robes that wealthy women bought in the better shops, and then he would make something that looked remarkably similar for a fraction of the price, using cheaper fabric and his own labor. It was democratized fashion before anyone used that phrase, take a desirable look, strip out the cost, and sell it to the women who could never have afforded the original. Through the late 60s and into the 70s, the operation grew. A kitchen table became a workshop. The workshop became hundreds of employees. He was no longer the errand boy or the worried store manager. He was a manufacturer with real volume, and the same nagging vulnerability he had carried for years. He was still making clothes for other people to sell. He still depended on retailers to pass his work to the customer. The crisis from his youth had never stopped whispering, and he had finally decided what to do about it. Here is where it gets interesting. The whole fashion industry then and now runs on a single assumption, that you have to guess. Designers and buyers sit down a year in advance and bet on what people will want next spring. They place enormous orders based on that bet. Then they spend months praying they guessed right. If they did, they make a fortune. If they guessed wrong, they are stuck with warehouses full of clothes nobody wants, slashing prices just to clear the racks. The entire business was built on forecasting the future, and the future is very hard to forecast. Ortega looked at that and saw something almost no one else did. The problem was the guessing itself. What if you did not guess? What if, instead of predicting demand a year out and pushing product toward the customer, you simply watched what the customer was actually buying right now and answered it almost instantly? Don't push, pull. To do that, you could not be 6 months and 3 middlemen away from the shop floor. You had to be standing in the store, watching. You had to make the clothes close to home, in small amounts, and react in days. And the only way to control all of that was to own all of it, including the one piece Ortega had never had: the store. So in 1975, he opened one. The first store opened on a busy shopping street in A Coruña, near the harbor. The name has a small legend attached to it. Ortega supposedly wanted to call it Zorba, after the film Zorba the Greek. But there was a bar with that same name nearby, and the molds for the lettering had already been made. So he rearranged the letters he had into something that worked: Zara. The store put his entire theory into practice at once. In the windows went fashionable, current-looking clothing, the kind of styles you would see in expensive boutiques, at prices ordinary people could actually pay. And because Ortega controlled the making, the moment something sold well, he could produce more of it, fast, and have it back on display while the trend was still alive. Customers noticed that the shop was never quite the same twice. There was always something new. It worked immediately. One store became several. Several became a chain across Spain. Within a few years, Zara was one of the most talked-about clothing retailers in the country. And Ortega had finally closed the loop he had been chasing since the day that order was canceled. He made the clothes. He sold the clothes. Nobody stood in between. But success created a new problem, the one that would force him to build the machine. By the 1980s, the rest of the industry was moving in exactly the opposite direction from Ortega. The conventional wisdom was simple. Manufacturing is expensive and slow, so get rid of it. Send the production to wherever labor is cheapest, Asia mostly, and focus on design and branding at home. Own as little as possible. Outsource everything. Ortega did the unthinkable. He bought more. In 1985, he pulled his companies together under a single holding company called Inditex, short for Industria de Diseño Textil. And inside that structure, he built something heretical. A fashion company that owned its own design teams, its own fabric supply, its own cutting and dyeing operations, its own factories close to home, and its own distribution. Vertical integration, top to bottom. Analysts thought it was backwards. Owning factories in Spain, where wages were far higher than in Asia, looked like a guaranteed way to lose on cost. Everyone knew you could not compete with cheap overseas labor by making clothes in Europe. But Ortega was not trying to win on cost. He was trying to win on speed. And speed required control. If you own every link in the chain, no one can make you wait. No supplier sets your timeline, no middleman takes your margin or your information. The whole apparatus could move as one. To make that real, he needed a single beating heart for the entire operation. He built it in a town called Arteixo. Arteixo is a town just outside A Coruña, and it is where Inditex put its center of gravity. The distribution complex there is enormous. A logistics engine running on miles of automated conveyor belts and overhead rails. Here is the part that surprises people. Almost every Zara garment in the world, no matter where it ends up, flows through this region in Spain. A shirt destined for a store in Tokyo or New York does not ship directly from a far-off factory. It comes into the hub, gets sorted, and goes back out. It sounds wildly inefficient. It is the opposite. Because most of Zara's production is made close to home, in Spain, in Portugal, in Morocco, in nearby Turkey, the goods can reach that hub in hours or days, not weeks on a container ship. This is nearshoring, and Ortega was doing it decades before the word became fashionable. Inside the hub, garments are sorted at extraordinary speed and shipped out to stores around the world twice a week, on a fixed rhythm. Trucks roll to European stores, planes carry the rest. Every store knows exactly when its delivery arrives. The whole system is tuned not for the lowest possible cost, but for the shortest possible time between an idea and a rack. And that single design choice, speed over cheapness, proximity over distance, is what makes the most famous number in fast fashion possible. So let's walk the cycle. A trend appears. Maybe a celebrity wears something striking. Maybe shoppers in Madrid keep asking for a particular cut of jacket. The signal reaches Zara's designers, not in a quarterly report, but within days. The designers sketch a version immediately. The pattern is cut at a facility nearby. The fabric, often pre-bought in neutral undyed form, is colored to match whatever is selling right now. The pieces are sewn in a factory a short drive away, or just across the border. The finished garments flow into the Arteixo hub, get tagged, sorted, and loaded. And then they appear on the rack in stores, sometimes in as little as 2 to 3 weeks from that first sketch. 15 days, in the famous version. Now hold that against the competition. A traditional retailer, at that same moment, is locked into decisions it made the previous year. Its clothes are already crossing an ocean on a ship. It cannot react to what is happening this week, because everything was committed months ago. Zara is selling the trend while its rivals are still waiting for last year's bet to arrive. It is not that Zara predicted the future better than anyone else. It refused to predict at all. It simply made itself fast enough to chase the present. And once you can do that, the entire concept of a fashion season, spring line, fall line, planned a year out, starts to look like a relic. Zara just kept making new clothes, all year, forever. But speed was only half of it. Ortega paired it with a second idea that is almost psychological. Zara does not make huge quantities of any single item. It makes small batches. A given design might arrive in a store in modest numbers, and when it sells out, it often is not restocked. Something new takes its place instead. To a traditional retailer, this looks like a mistake. You found something popular and you stopped making it? But think about what it does to the shopper. If you see a jacket you like at Zara and you hesitate, there is a real chance it will simply be gone next week. There is no comfortable assumption that it will always be there. So you buy it now. Scarcity becomes the engine of urgency. And because the stores receive new shipments twice a week, there is always a reason to come back. The shop you visited on Monday is not the shop you visit on Friday. Regular customers learn to drop in constantly just to see what was new, visiting Zara stores far more often than they visited typical clothing shops. Small batches also lowered the risk on any single bet. If a design flopped, there were only a few of them, easy to discount and clear. The downside was tiny. The upside, repeated thousands of times a year, was enormous. The psychology worked. People kept coming back, and they kept buying now. All of this depends on one thing: information. The machine is only as good as what it knows about the customer. So Zara turned every store into a listening post. Store managers became some of the most important people in the company. Throughout the day, they tracked not just what sold, but what nearly sold. What did customers pick up and put back? What did they ask for that wasn't on the rack? Which color moved and which one sat? That information flowed back to the design teams quickly and constantly, a live feed from the shop floor to the people deciding what to make next. The rest of the industry was working blind by comparison. They had committed to their lineup a year earlier, so even perfect information would arrive too late to use. Zara could act on it within days. It was a feedback loop, not a forecast. Ortega had replaced the crystal ball with a pair of eyes in every store, and the genius of it was that the customer was effectively designing the next batch without ever knowing it. Every purchase, every hesitation, every request was a vote, counted almost in real time, and answered on the next delivery truck. The company was not guessing what people wanted. It was asking them, every single day, and listening. Then there is the thing Zara famously did not do. It did not advertise. While rival brands poured fortunes into glossy campaigns, magazine spreads, and celebrity endorsements, Zara ran almost no traditional advertising at all. For a fashion company of its size, that is close to unheard of. So where did the money go instead? Into location. Ortega's view was that the store itself was the advertisement, so the store had to be in the place where the most people, the right people, would walk past it. Zara opened flagship locations on the most expensive, most prestigious shopping streets in the world. The kind of corners where luxury houses sit. A Zara would plant itself right there, beside brands charging 10 times as much, in a beautiful storefront with constantly changing windows. The message was silent but powerful: we belong on this street too. The rent was enormous, but it replaced an advertising budget that would have been even larger, and it put the product directly in front of the customer at the exact moment they were out shopping. The window display, refreshed constantly, did the work a commercial would have done. It was one more inversion. Everyone else rented cheap space and bought expensive attention. Ortega bought expensive space and let it speak for itself, and it all added up to a fortune almost no one saw coming. In 2001, Inditex went public. The company that had grown quietly in a rainy corner of Spain put its shares on the market, and the world finally got a clear look at what Amancio Ortega had built. The numbers were staggering. Zara was no longer a Spanish chain. It was a global retailer with stores spreading across continents, and it was only the largest brand in a whole family of them. Pull & Bear, Massimo Dutti, Bershka, Stradivarius, and more, all running on the same fast machine. Ortega's stake made him one of the wealthiest people alive. In some years, when the share price climbed, he was ranked among the very richest in the world. For brief stretches, the richest of all, ahead of the technology billionaires whose names everyone knew. And almost nobody could picture his face. He had spent decades avoiding the press. He gave virtually no interviews. There were barely any published photographs of him for much of his career. He kept working out of the same unremarkable region where it all began, often eating lunch in the company canteen with employees. The errand boy who once carried other people's shirts across A Coruña now sat atop one of the largest fortunes on earth, built not on a single invention, but on a way of doing things. And yet the very speed that made him rich was about to draw a different kind of attention. Because there is a cost to fast, and it is real. The same model that lets Zara answer a trend in days is the model that taught the world to treat clothing as nearly disposable. Critics gave it a name, fast fashion, and Zara became its defining example. Start with the designs themselves. Zara's instinct for turning runway looks into cheap copies, fast, has drawn repeated accusations of design theft. Independent designers and major houses have argued that the company lifted their work, and Zara has faced lawsuits over it more than once. Then there is the human side of the supply chain. Producing this much clothing this quickly invites hard scrutiny of factory conditions, and the workers stitching the garments. Questions Inditex, like the rest of the industry, has been pressed on for years. And there is the planet. The whole system is built to make you buy more often, and to discard last week's purchase for this week's. The result is mountains of textile waste, heavy water and chemical use in dyeing, and a carbon bill that comes due whether or not anyone is looking. None of this is a secret, and Inditex has made sustainability pledges in response. But the tension sits at the very heart of the machine. The thing that makes Zara brilliant, speed, volume, constant newness, is the same thing that makes fast fashion a problem. You cannot fully fix one without slowing the other. And that is the unresolved question Ortega's invention leaves behind. Step back, and the whole thing traces to a single bad day. A young manufacturer in Galicia, holding an order someone refused to take, deciding he would never again let another person stand between what he made and the customer who bought it. That decision became a store. The store became a method. The method became a machine. Design, dye, sew, ship, sell, all owned, all close to home, all moving in days instead of seasons. And the machine rewired how the entire world buys clothes. Walk into almost any shopping street on Earth today, and the logic Ortega built is everywhere. Fast, constant, responsive, a little ruthless. Rivals copied the model. An entire category was named after it. Whether that is something to celebrate or something to reckon with depends on where you stand. But the engineering is undeniable. A railway worker's son who left school at 13, who never wanted his picture taken, looked at the oldest assumption in fashion, that you have to guess the future, and decided he simply would not. He chose, instead, to chase the present faster than anyone else could. He didn't disrupt the fashion industry. He rebuilt its operating system, from nothing. If a story like this made you see something ordinary a little differently, subscribe, and we'll keep digging up the rest.